Over the years, cricket has witnessed some amazing voices describe the game in the background, obviously. Some quite analytical, some with absolutely amazing attention to little details, some with a great sense of humor, and quite a few of these who made our listening experience incredibly remarkable, I must say. Today with us, we have an absolute legend, an all-time great in the combox, Mr. Henry Blofeld. Sir, I cannot begin to tell you how brilliant this is to be having this conversation with you. How's everything back there?
My dear old thing. Well, it's a great, great, great privilege to be with you. Really is. And I'm looking forward to this very much indeed.
Yep. So are we. So are we. So I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if your last foreign test match as a commentator was in India, it was in Chennai, if I'm not wrong.
No, it was in Chennai, my last one overseas.
Yeah.
The last one that was in was that early 2017, I would
Yeah.
think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And when I made a frightful mistake. My eyes gave out on me in the end, and I couldn't see well enough, and I got something so badly wrong in Chennai. When
Mhm.
I can't remember who it was. It was Dawson, that's right, the Hampshire
Yeah.
batsman, and it was what was the little leg spinner called? Indian leg spinner.
Uh,
No,
Jayant
playing.
Yadav. No, not sorry. Amit Mishra.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, he came in bowled Dawson, and I gave him out short eggs to cover, and he was bowled. And I
Oh
said,
God.
and I
Oh,
should
wow.
never forget Sonny Gavaskar, who was alongside me. When I paused, he looked at me very sorrowfully. He said, "No, no, Henry, he was bowled." And I realized then that the time had come. However, I did 2 or 3 test matches the next summer in England in 2017, and then bowed out the last test of the summer at Lords against the West Indies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
We.
that since then, I've not been near it since then, except that I do actually do a little television commentary round the ground, as it well, not it is really type of television for Lashing's World 11, which is a charity side. But otherwise, I've kept away from cricket,
Yeah.
and the airwaves have not been infected by me.
Oh, that's definitely all right, Henry. I mean, you've been in the game for what, over 50 years, or close to 50 years as a commentator, if I'm not wrong. 47?
I started, yes, 47 years I did in the commentary box altogether.
Yeah.
Although, in fact, I started writing about cricket for the Times in London 10 years before that. So, I mean, I was
Yeah.
in it for nearly 60 years in all. And then, of course, I did play a little bit before that. I played a little bit of first-class cricket. And so, I mean, really, yes, they'd go for 65 years. Awful, isn't it? A
Indeed.
wasted life, do you think? I don't know.
No, definitely, no, definitely. You've been absolutely amazing over the years. You're quite an institution in itself, I must say. And I was watching an interview, Henry, where you were talking about how much you loved coming to India and how much different it is in this part of the world, especially the love for cricket or how much people enjoy it. Uh, what is it about Indian cricket culture that compels you that much?
I don't. It's always a difficult one. I knew I thought you might ask me this.
Yeah,
It's a combination of lots of different
yeah,
things.
yeah,
I love India. I love the enthusiasm in India. I love watching the game there. I love spin bowling, and you see lots of spin bowling. Although sometimes I feel your pitches attract spinners rather more than they should. But that's a different subject. In the old days, of course, it was always Calcutta. Eden Gardens was the rail spinners wicket, wasn't it? And I never forget Tony Gregg's side out spinning India, really. Funnily enough, if you look at that match in what was it, the mid-70s, when Tony Gregg sided one in Calcutta, it was the seam bowlers who did the damage for England, amazingly. Although Bedi, Chandrasekhar, Prasanna were turning the ball square, it was an extraordinary occasion. But no, I love India. I love the people. I love the climate. I love the hotels. I just love the whole feel of it, and
yeah,
everyone's so friendly.
yeah,
And may I say, being very greedy, I love Indian food too.
yeah.
And so, I mean, it's all win-win, if you see what I mean, for me. And I really mean seriously, I enjoy watching cricket in India more than anywhere else. And also another reason I love it is if I as an Englishman go to Australia or South Africa, it's very much the same sort of background that I'm used to. But when I come to India, it's totally different. It's very exciting, and I absolutely love it. And in fact, was in India for a month in 2019, making the Real Marigold Hotel. We were in Pondicherry for a fortnight, and then up in Rishikesh. And goodness me, that was a thrill.
I'm sure it must have been. It must have been. And obviously, one of your major connections with India was you coming here in 1964 as a reporter and very nearly making your debut. What was that story about? Yeah.
Well, that was an extraordinary story. We played 4 test matches, strong batting side, weak bowling sides. And Bapu Nadkarni bowled for 20 maiden overs in a row at one of the test matches. It may have been Bangalore, I can't remember. They were all drawn, the games. The first one was in Bangalore, was a draw. And they went on to Hyderabad for a 3-day game. And when Ken Barrington got the only ball to kick off a length in Hyderabad this century or last century, and he broke Ken Barrington's arm, he had to go home.
Mike Smith was the captain, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Mike Smith was the captain?
MJK, yes, he was. Yeah. Colin Cowdrey would have been, but he broke his arm playing West Hall, West Indies at Lords in earlier that year, didn't he? In '63, it was the previous year. That's right. And anyway, we then got to Bombay. Forgive me if I use the old names, but it was Bombay in those days. And the players went out to dinner and they ate something that was not good and went down with tummy trouble. And they were, had the match started 3 days earlier, England would only had about 6 players. But when the evening before the match came, we had a press conference, and the game was at the Braben Stadium, the Cricket Club of India. And David Clark was the manager, and he had a press conference. And at the end of it, he said, "Players, will you stay behind?" And I did. And he said, "Look, tonight we've only got 10 fit men." And he said, "You and I are the only two of the others to have played first-class cricket. You're 20 years younger than me. Try and get to bed before midnight." And I said, "I will." And the next day, I turned up at the dressing room. But Mickey Stewart, who was the vice captain, was in the Sun, I think it was called the Sun and Sand Hospital in Mumbai. And I was on the coast. I remember going to see him, or I'd been to visit someone there. Anyway, he heard the news that England only had 10 men, got out of bed, ashen-faced, came and played, fielded it backward short leg for an hour and a half, and was back in hospital before lunch with a temperature of 104. But my patriotism did not extend to being 12th man. And I remember when David Clark said to me, "You're going to have to play," I made a very cheeky remark. I said to him, "Now, David, I will play, but only on one understanding." And he's rather surprised. He said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, I know Peter Parfitt and Colin Cowdrey are flying out as the reinforcements. They hadn't arrived in time for the second test." And I said, "If I get 50 or above in either innings, I'm damned if I'm standing down for Calcutta." He looked at me and said, "I think, my dear boy, we will jump that particular fence when we get to it." And of course, I didn't play, and there we are. But it was a near miss. And it would have been wonderful, but I wouldn't have got any runs at all because it was Chandrasekhar's first test. And I've never really been very good at reading leg breaks from Googlies. So I think I'd have been Blofeld, both Chandrasekhar, no, or for very few anyway.
Who knows what could have happened. But again, it was such a wonderful story that to listen to. But again, whatever happens for our good. And what turned out, well, as it turns out, you joined the Test match special in 1972, if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I 72. I actually had a sort of trial commentary for them in '68. And when they said, "That's fine, we've added your name to the list," because they liked it. I thought it was awful, but they seemed to like it. But they then said to me, there won't be many opportunities. And when the telephone hadn't rung by the end of 1971, I was a little bit puzzled, and I went to the West Indies that winter to watch New Zealand's first ever tour there. As a writer, I was writing for newspapers. And when I got there, I found there were two radio networks in each island. And the government network, the CBU, had signed up Alan Richards, the New Zealand commentator. And the other network, Rediffusion, wanted a foreign voice. And a chap came up to me and said, have you ever commentated about cricket? And I said, I've hardly ever done anything else, which was a complete lie because I'd never done any. However, they asked me to do it. And I did the whole series in front of a less exacting audience than probably the Test match special in England. And when I came back in 72, I had a letter waiting for me saying, would I do a report, really, rather than commentate, on a game at Chelmsford, Essex, Warwickshire, at the end of the Saturday and the Monday at the end of May. And I did that. And the following week, I had a letter from Robert Hudson, who was head of sport, saying, would I join Test match special for 2 one-day games against Australia at Lord's at the end of August and at Edgbaston early in September. So it all happened rather quickly.
Yeah, that's amazing indeed. So one of the questions that I wanted to add to that was, things have changed quite drastically since the days that you were talking about back in the 1972 and all of that. Just from a commentary perspective, like the things around you, there weren't many like, technologically speaking, or maybe these days there is a producer, there is a statistician, there is an assistant producer just as a backup for the producer. And there's just so many men around you. There's so many wires and cameras and all of that. How did you enjoy the latter half of your career as a commentator, or the first half of it?
Well, I must make you mustn't confuse. I was always radio, not television.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So, and I don't think the television box, the radio box, was quite so cluttered up as the television box. Television commentary and radio commentary are very different. I wasn't very good at television because I talked too much. And when something happened off air, off camera, and I saw it and it was amusing, I would go for it. And of course, producers hated that. The cameras had to try and follow me. And no, I was never very good at telly, and I didn't actually therefore enjoy it very much. But no, I found the way of commentating changed. I started with Brian Johnston, John Arlott, and Christopher Martin Jenkins, that lot. And it was great fun. And I have always been one who wanted to paint the picture. And I used to talk about the seagulls and the airplanes and the crowd. And because I think for a picture to be a composite picture, you've got to get the things, everything in the frame, the picture, the frame, the mount, and the trees at the side, and the sky above, as well as the cricket that goes on in the middle. And I've always believed that to be very important. And fun enough, since I retired, there is no one I think really in England or anywhere who does this. And I have an enormous number of letters, emails nowadays, saying, what a pity it is and how much they miss it. As long as you don't let it get in the way of the action, which I don't think I ever did, I don't think it matters. And I think it actually makes the listener feel that he can actually see what I'm seeing. If you paint the picture, he can sort of feel it more. Whereas if you just talk about the cricket in the middle, it's a little bit, it's not anchored anyway. It somehow becomes not quite so immediate and also personal. I don't know. You may think I'm talking nonsense, but I do feel that if you give these details, you talk about the lady in the red sari at Square Leg, and it not anyway, just that there it is, and it's quite noticeable. You can see it, and it's lovely. And I think the listeners like to hear this.
Yes, it takes a little bit of the seriousness of the game, and that's how I'd actually like to listen to it. That's what you added to the game, and it was quite. What we've heard was all some clips on YouTube. Obviously, we were not present listening to you back in the day because I'm quite young. At least I can say that. But again, what we do remember is what I do remember at least is watching your final game, Henry, like against the West Indies. You just mentioned about it, and it was quite a spectacle, wasn't it? Like you got on the field. I remember we were getting the Sky Sports broadcast, so they were just zooming in on you as you were just uh, handing over the mic to the next person. I think it was Ed Smith, if I remember it quite well.
That's
Uh,
right, Ed Smith. Yeah.
yeah. So you just walked away, and there was something with the binoculars. It just got stuck in the wires and everything. And people were standing. What a beautiful sight! And you got to do that lap of honor. How beautiful was that day?
Well, it was extraordinary. I went down in the lift from the commentary box at Lord's, not knowing this was going to happen. I went down with Jonathan Agnew and Vic Marks, thinking I was going to go and help them with the prize giving in front of the pavilion at the end. And then Agus, we got onto the grass, and Agus said, "Come on, we're going to walk around the boundary." And I said, "Well, that's silly. There's no cricket. Let's go across the ground." He said, "The ground staff don't want us to." And I bought that. And I thought that's fair enough. And so we set off. And after he got about 10 yards, I realized I'd been set up because I was about 5 yards ahead of the other two. And the whole ground stood to me. And I walked round. A lady in the mound stand came up to me and said, "Would I marry her?" Which was a good start to the lap of honor. I said no, because I'm already married. And anyway, then I got to the pavilion halfway around, and Matthew Fleming, who was the president of MCC, was standing there and said to me, "Blurs, you've done half the ground, now go and do the other half." So I went all the way around, back to the nursery and all the way around, and then came across to the prize giving, which was almost over. And Joe Root said to me, "Blurs, come up and have a glass of champagne in the England dressing room," which was a terrific honor, wasn't it? Yeah. And I went up there. There was no champagne at all, but they did find some in the end. And we had lots of laughs. And it was great value. And I was very, very privileged and lucky. And the England players presented me, and I have it in this house framed actually, an England shirt signed by all the players, which is a lovely thing to have.
Indeed. I mean, what a great way to finish sign off, isn't it?
Well, it was amazing, and I never really at the time. You may not. I don't know whether you understand this when I say it, but at the time, I almost felt embarrassed walking around the ground, as though it was. I really shouldn't be there, and it went on, and I sort of couldn't believe it, and I just felt, well, I wondered if I really should be here doing this, and then I think it didn't really sink in, and for about 2 or 3 days. And then one realized when I saw all the photographs, and I was wearing this green linen coat. I hope you notice I'm wearing it, by the way, today in your honor, a shirt which was made for me in Pondicherry when I was there with the Marigold Hotel. Wonderful linen shirts in India. Another, you asked me the reasons I love coming there. That's another very important reason.
Yes.
But anyway, I'm going back to Lord's. It was extraordinary, and it had never happened to anyone before, and I wonder if it'll ever happen again. And definitely I was the one who was very lucky.
Indeed. I mean, you totally deserved it as well. I mean, that was quite a beautiful moment to watch on television. I'm sure. I know when I sort of slightly understand when you say you got a little embarrassed by it. I maybe slightly, but you totally deserved it, Henry. I must say that.
And I think embarrassed is actually the word. You're quite right, Henry. That's what I felt. I just sort of felt slightly I shouldn't be there, and but and I don't know that I therefore really relished it quite as much as I should have done at the time.
I totally get it. I mean, talk about the England team and the Lords.
You can't ask me things like that. The England team, go on. I'm only laughing.
So the 2019 World Cup that we were talking about, which England obviously won. I mean, after having watched England stumble right across, like at the business end of a good number of times, I must say, how good was that to watch England finally win the World Cup?
Well, it was an extraordinary occasion. That it was an amazing game of cricket. The end. No, you'll never get another game, however long cricket is played, to match the end. I thought, to be absolutely frank, I thought New Zealand were desperately unlucky. They played the better cricket, to my mind, at the crucial points of the day. And then there's 4 overthrows. No one was to blame. I'm not blaming anyone. And the laws of the game quite said that it was 4 runs. But it was the cruelest blow in the world. And you know, I tell you something, and I tell you a reason I thought what I think should have happened, I would have done. I would like to have seen someone come from the committee room at Lords and say, right, after this, we're not going to give the World Cup to England, we're going to share it. Because I think that would have been the right result. I really do. I felt and I thought New Zealand need enormous congratulations the way they behaved. They weren't in any way bitter about it. Kane Williamson was magnificent. They were, I mean, they really were cheated out of victory. I use the word cheated in inverted commas. I mean, they weren't cheated, but in a way they were. And they behaved impeccably well at a time when sportsmen don't behave well when things go against them like that. And everyone, I mean, I think sort of those sort of standards have slipped, unfortunately, all produced perhaps by money. I don't know. Anyway, I just felt that New Zealand were really rather done over that day. In the end, you've got to hand it to Stokes. I mean, Ben Stokes is an amazing cricketer. He not only did it then, I mean, he did it then in the Super Over, and then he did it 3 weeks later at Headingley against Australia, when that rather improbable Jack Leach, who looks a bit like Harry Potter on another day, with his glasses and everything, helped him put on 74, making just 1 run himself. I thought it was wonderful. But I mean, you see, Stokes, like Botham, Ian Botham got up to all sorts of tricks off the field. Stokes has done. If they didn't do that, they wouldn't play cricket the way they did. I think it sort of goes together in a funny way. But I mean, it was wonderful for England, obviously, to win. But I just wish they'd won outright and not on number of boundaries that have been hit, because that's rather a messy way of winning. And I just felt that actually New Zealand had played rather the better cricket.
In fact, it was like the universe was telling, universe was given the signs that there is no separating both these sides. And it was not just the 50 over contest, it was also the super over which ended in it. I mean, you don't see that happening in any game. And it was the World Cup final. I mean, the emotional roller coaster it must have been. And as you said, truly, the New Zealanders were absolutely brilliant with the way they behaved and the way they held themselves afterwards. It's just something you don't get to see often these days. Really.
You don't, no, you don't, and I'm glad you understand that as well, because I mean, I just felt, well, am I being a bit stuffy about it? But I just thought they were magnificent, and I'm very glad that you back that up. I really am.
Yeah, I mean, cricket has changed in that regard a lot. At least I try to read a lot about the game. There are plenty of books right behind me, a lot of cricketing books. I try to read a lot about how the game was and how the game has evolved. So I do get when you say that it's not happening quite often. Yes, it isn't. But again, coming back to the discussion, talking about how things have not been quite familiar, at least the Indian team, at least because we are in India and a lot of what we cater to are a lot of the Indian fans. I think they'll definitely love listening to you about the Indian team, because what you saw as you said, India being captained by Mansur Ali Khan Patodis and the Ajit Wadekar, and then the Kapil Devs and all of these people, and to the current generation stars like MS Dhoni, Virat Kohli. Uh, but things are slightly different now. India are going away to Australia and winning there, and not just once but twice, which is something unthinkable about for me for a
Well,
long
I
period of
think
time.
it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful, and I think also, I mean, you Indian spin bowlers have always been the strength, but now it's not the spin bowlers. And the opening bowlers too are pretty jolly good. They really are, and they're a well balanced side. Mind you, India are always going, I think, with their spinners to find it rather easier at home than they are away. I mean, I think when they come to England this summer, if coronavirus allows that tour to go ahead, which is not all by any means certain, I think they're going to find it harder over here, simply because the spinners won't make the impact. But as I say, India's seam bowlers now are so much better than they were that it may be they won't need the spinners. I mean, we will see. And it promises to be a very, very interesting series. You see, I don't think England is that good. We're at the top of the order. We're hopeless. We're rubbish. I mean, we're 3 wickets down for nothing, whatever happens. And Joe Root, he's a wonderful player, but he keeps getting out for 40 or 53 or 62. And what you've got to do to win, I know you got a big one in Chennai in that first match, and also in Sri Lanka. But when the going is tough, and Joe Root doesn't at the moment get runs against Australia, and that is the ultimate test when the going really is tough. I actually don't think Joe Root's a very good captain, and I wouldn't have him as captain. I would make Josh Butler captain. I think you want the most intelligent man on the side to be in charge, and I think Butler he's never quite certain of his role. There are lots of wicketkeepers about. There's David Bairstow. Then, of course, there's Folkes, who's much the best keeper of them all. And he's not absolutely sure of his place. If you made him captain, he would be. And I think it would give him huge confidence, which would benefit his own game very much as well. And I think by taking the responsibility away from Root, it would enable him to work out 1 or 2 problems he may have. And I think it would be greatly to the advantage of the side. Having said that, I don't think it'll happen, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, in recent times, obviously, the English side as well, they have emphasized a lot on the limited overs game, haven't they? Like, do you think the emphasis on limited overs has been putting to an extent where it is sort of halting the test progress?
Well, you see, what happened to start with, England didn't pay any attention to one-day cricket, and they became embarrassed. And it was they did, and it was Andrew Strauss who took over as head of cricket, and he now had to retire because his wife died. It was tragic, and he quite understandably couldn't go on. He realised that England had to contribute more to the one-day game. If you contribute, if you emphasise the one-day game, you are inevitably going to damage your test side, because to win a test match, you've got to have batsmen who are capable of batting time. This is just one example. You've got to have the Alistair Cooks who can bat for 8 hours. Batsmen don't do that today. As a result, you see, Test cricket has become much more watchable because you very seldom get those interminable 5-day draws when only 3 innings are completed. Nowadays, Test matches almost all end in 3 or 4 days. And so every ball is part of a result, which I think makes it much more watchable for the public. But equally, the prices the public have to pay these days are absurd. And I mean, in India, to go along for a 5-day test match, and you've got a relatively low per capita income in the population, it just is beyond their reach. And the authorities have got to do something about this, because in fact, the money that's taken at the gate is only small change. It's all television money that pays the big bills. And so why they've got to be greedy about the people about gate money, the entrance money, I don't know. It seems to me that this is something that cricket authorities all around the world have got to come to grips with, because it is awful to watch exciting test matches in front of a crowd of a few hundred when it should be packed to the rafters with 50,000. And I really believe the authorities are slipping up badly on this.
Indeed, I mean, I understand when you say that. And in recent, at the Ahmedabad Stadium, which has been recently re-inaugurated, if I must say.
Which stadium? I didn't hear that.
Ahmedabad, the Motera, the new world's biggest stadium. We've just taken over MCG, by the way, as far as the crowd capacity is concerned.
It's bigger capacity than Eden Gardens.
Yeah, way more, yeah. So what happened to Eden Gardens is over the years, I think there have been some changes that were made. So due to which the current capacity of Eden Gardens is around about 60,000. This current Ahmedabad stadium can accommodate up to 110,000 people. So
100, can it really? I didn't realize that. I was in Ahmedabad when, in about 2012, Alistair Cook had won the series. You remember?
Yes.
I can't remember what the result. Did India win that first test in Ahmedabad? I know they did. Cook made a lot of runs in the second innings. Pujara made the first of his
double hundred,
hundreds, didn't he? We
Yeah,
couldn't get Pujara out in that series. And then Swanee had him stumped in Bombay for about 160. And
yeah,
I remember that very well. Of course, Peterson and Cook made a lot of runs in there at the Brabourne Stadium.
yeah. That by the way, that was the last time India lost a Test series in India.
Well, yeah, and it's always different. I, fun enough, have seen England win two series, the Tony Gregg series in 76, 7,
Yeah,
and Alistair Cook, which is it's surprising.
yeah,
I didn't see all Alistair Cook. See, I only saw those first two tests, and then I
yeah.
had to go back home. But I was sent home, not in disgrace, but I was only employed, I think, for two test matches.
All right, all right. Yes, India won the first Test match. Then what happened? The following two tests, England won it. The final test was in Nagpur, if I'm not wrong, and
Yep.
it went close, but it was a stalemate eventually, and England did win it 2-1. That's what happened.
Then I never forget Nagpur. Do you remember that extraordinary inning Sonny Gavaskar played when they played against New Zealand, India, New Zealand,
In the World
in
Cup.
the World Cup? I
Yes,
think it
yes.
was, and they had to win in double quick time to qualify for the semi-final against England at the Brabourne Stadium, which England in fact won. And Sonny went in and hit the first ball of the innings from Chatfield into a group of ladies in the president's box above the sight screen at the pavilion. And they all fluttered around like little peacocks in their lovely colored saris. I'd never forget it.
Oh, wow.
But Sonny scored 100, didn't he, incredibly quickly.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
he
a
did.
wonderful innings, and whenever I see him, I always remind him of it.
Yes, and funnily enough, that is the only time he scored 100 in an ODI game.
The only time,
He scored 100 in an ODI game. That is the only time.
really,
Yeah,
was it really? I didn't know that.
yeah. I mean, he's had a lot of them in obviously 34 of them in nine Test matches, but the 35th in international cricket was that, and that was his last in international cricket as well.
Yeah, well, goodness me.
Yeah,
It's an innings I've got half a dozen innings in my head that I will never forget, and that is one of them.
indeed, indeed. I mean, there are plenty of such amazing stories that we can talk to you about. But again, just bringing him back to a little bit about commentary, because even in the current crop, at least our generation is more used to watching television commentators, and uh, maybe not that much of radio commentators. But over the years, you've worked with, I think, almost all the legendary personalities. So, as far as the broadcasters are concerned, let it be the Christopher Martin Jenkins, as you mentioned, John Arlotts, and all of them, Brian Johnston, and uh, in our country, at least, the voice that we admire a lot is Mr. Harsha Bhogle and all of them. Uh,
I
who,
tell you who I remember. I
yeah.
remember Beres Sabadikari, going back as far as that, and
Oh,
Anand Setalvad. Do you remember Anand Setalvad? He was in, I think, the 70s, 80s.
okay.
And gosh, yes, and Harsha, obviously.
Yeah.
And who was before Harsha? Who was the main commentator before him?
So
I
before,
can't remember. I can't remember. I can see him, but anyway, don't worry.
yeah,
But yes, I think I haven't. You see, the Australians, I've commentated with all Alan McGilvray and all,
yes,
or Jim Maxwell, Neville
yes,
Oliver, or Tim Lane. Indeed, Tony. But then you see, we haven't yet talked about one of the truly great commentators of all time, who was Tony Cozier.
yeah, yes,
And Tony Cozier, let me tell you something. I said earlier, commentary on television and radio are two very different disciplines. The only man I've ever met who could walk from a television commentary box and a minute and a half later be sitting in a radio commentary box and adapt totally without any hiccups at all was Tony Cozier. He did it. He was absolutely amazing how he managed to do that. And he was the dearest of men. And it was sad when he passed away. It really was. He was a wonderful man.
indeed, indeed. Henry, when you talk about just the difference between radio and television, is it because a lot of the details that you want to say, the camera is already doing that job? Is it that makes it difficult, or that is that what takes that pleasure out of doing commentary for you?
Well, it's why it's different is that a radio commentator, which I am, I am the equivalent of the camera in the television box. You don't say in television he's coming into bowl, you can see it. You
Yeah.
don't say he plays forwards, you see. What you do is a commentator on television says something that adds to the picture, that explains the picture. And
Yeah.
also the other thing is you never talk off screen. Television commentators are actually watching the monitor all the time because they mustn't talk about things that the viewer cannot see, which is what
Yes.
I used to do. And why
Yes.
I made all my producers either lose their hair or it went very grey.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
yeah. My father, who was a great avid radio listener, he used to talk. I mean, ever since I said I'm going to be interviewing you, he was talking about these very details that you used to explain everything around, and you painted the picture pretty much for the viewers.
well, that's what I thought my job was,
Yeah.
and it's just I'm sad now that no one does it because I
Yeah.
don't. When I listen to it,
Yeah.
I want to know what's happening all around,
Yeah.
and I don't get it. No one tells me that nowadays at all. And
Uh,
you know what I mean. I think it. I don't know. Anyway. That's my way of looking at it.
it's totally understandable. Totally understandable. Uh, Henry, you were a wicket keeper in your playing days, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I was there, believe it or not. You're looking at the size of me now, you'd think I could just stand behind the stumps without moving at all. I'd rather good week.
We saw some old pictures of you batting, Henry. I think it was back. I don't know how old was that picture, but you were quite thin back then. Yeah.
No,
The wicket keeping as an art itself. I mean, back in the day, it was that was the sole focus, and these days, everyone has to be a good batsman as well. And
well,
it,
you see, wicketkeepers today are chosen because of their batting ability. The best wicketkeeper doesn't come into it. I mean, if England had the best wicketkeeper, folks would have never been out of the side since
yeah,
scoring 100 in his first Test match against Sri
yeah,
Lanka. But in fact, they go for the batting. And I mean, one Alan Knott was the greatest wicketkeeper I ever saw, and he's actually scored 700s for England, and so his batting might just have got him in. But I mean, people like Godfrey Evans, who was a wonderful keeper, he would in today's game with today's thinking would never have got into the side because his batting, he was a slogger batting in number 8, and wicketkeepers have got to be serious batsmen today, and therefore inevitably the wicketkeeper's job has been devalued. But I mean, the point is that if you're a wicketkeeper and you drop Vivian Richards when he's made 3 and he makes 258, you've got an
yeah,
awful lot to make up, haven't you? And
yeah.
therefore, it seems to me that a wicketkeeper's job is so important. I think it's a false economy often to choose a wicketkeeper because of his batting.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think there's a name that really popped in my head. The big commentator in India before Harsha. Were you by chance mentioning Taliar Khan?
Mention who?
Taliar Khan. I think he was
Yes,
back.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
That I knew. Yeah, absolutely one. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Exactly. That
that,
just
that
popped in
one.
my
Yeah,
head.
yeah, indeed, indeed.
Uh,
But it's funny going back. And of course, I remember Vizzy, the Maharaj Kumar Vizzy anagram. When
okay.
I was with in 63-4, Vizzy used to do the radio commentary. And his great line was he would say, and Titmus comes into bowl and he bowls a ball. and
Oh, vivid.
that always used to
Yeah,
make me laugh.
yeah. Quite vivid. Very detailed. That was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Indeed. Henry, we've spent a lot of time together. It's almost close to an hour now. Just before we let you go, who are the cricketers at least in the current generation, who you very much enjoy watching? And it's not because of the details and everything,
Well,
but
I'm going to
watching
start with
them.
the Indian cricketers.
Yeah,
Kohli, obviously, Virat Kohli is a wonderful
yeah.
player. I've not seen you. Is it Gill, your opening batsman? I've not seen him.
Shubman
I'm
Gill.
told he's wonderful.
Yes,
He,
Shubman
do
Gill.
you agree with that?
Yes.
Good. I long to see him, and I'd watch those spinners, Ashwin and Azhar, bowl forever. I love watching really high class spin bowling. Ben Stokes, I would watch him. I think he's a wonderful cricketer. Joe Root when he's going well, of course, wonderful. Um, And of course, Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad have been. I've seen them both bowl magnificently. Jimmy at the age of 37 still goes on. I don't know how he does it, but I mean, he's been taking a lot of wickets, hasn't he? He took
Yes.
quite a lot of wickets in that first test in India. He did well, didn't he? And now, who else in Australia? Well, the Australians are. I mean, I don't much care for him because of the habits he gets up to. But David Warner is a wonderful batsman. You've got to say that.
Yeah.
And if only he could sort of think a bit differently on certain issues. If you see what I mean.
Yes.
But they've got some wonderful. I mean, Hazelwood's a wonderful cricketer. They've got Mitchell Stark has improved. I tell you who's amazing in that Australian side, actually. And I never thought. I've always watched him right from the start, and I never thought he'd come anything. It was Nathan Lyon, the off spinner. Yeah. I think he's an amazing bowler, and also he's not the worst number 11 either. He knows a bit about batting. I just wish we could see the West Indies really come to it again, because we need a strong West Indies. New Zealand, I think New Zealand have got a splendid side. Trent Bolt, Kane Williamson, Guptill. I think they're very underrated perhaps at the moment. And then of course, in Pakistan, there are some the batting there is wonderful, some of it, and I think now that they're beginning to play cricket in their own country a bit more, it's going to allow them. It's going to make them feel. I think they'll improve because of that. I think playing all their home matches in the UAE was a little bit dispiriting, and so I think we need as many good sides as we can get. I'd love to think that Afghanistan and Ireland are going to come through, but I mean, they were both elected to Test cricket in a way to help the game in the country. They probably technically didn't deserve it. Their standard of play was not good enough. Doesn't matter if they can go through. I mean, when Sri Lanka first acquired Test status, they may not quite have been up for it, but very soon they were. And this may happen. I mean, obviously there are other issues in Afghanistan which I can't talk about and we mustn't talk about, but which is going to make it terribly difficult for them. And in Ireland, I don't know. I would like to think that they will develop into a good Test side. But the game is fairly thinly. It doesn't have too much of a base in Ireland, and that worries me. It may not be quite strong enough to sustain a Test side. I don't know. They've got some good players at the moment, but when this lot go, I'm not certain what's coming behind them. But and as I say, I'd love to see a strong West Indies again. South Africa. I'm talking about South Africa. Yeah. They have their moments, but South Africa still choke, don't they? When they get to a winning situation, they don't seem to be able to press it home as much as they should. But they bowl well, they bat well, but I don't know if there's anyone there particularly. Am I missing anyone? Who would you say you would like to go and see? I mean, A.B. de Villiers was wonderful. But he's gone from Test cricket. But I think does he still play one-day cricket?
No, he's totally retired from all international formats.
I thought he had. But he was good. Amla was
classy.
Yeah, he was, and you know, they had some wonderful cricketers. And of course, I mean, going back a bit, Donald, Alan Donald, White Lightning.
Yeah.
Goodness me, he was a wonderful bowler, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And I mean, one loved Jonty Rhodes too in the field. Although, mind you, the best fielder ever was the South African Colin Bland. Who played in the 60s and that sort of time. I saw him, and he was absolutely amazing. It Lords in, I think it was 65, when he threw out Ken Barrington and Jim Parks. Having one stump to aim at in each case, he threw Parks out from cover and Barrington out from the boundary, and hit the stump straight. Amazing, absolutely amazing. The best fielder I've ever seen. I could go on like this forever. Alan Knott, the best wicketkeeper I've ever seen. And I don't think I think it's difficult to argue with that. Then bowlers, Kapil Dev, Fred Truman, Dennis Lilly, Malcolm Marshall, Michael Holding, Andy Roberts. I mean, you know, you can just go on, can't you? The best bowler of all, there has to be Shane Warne. Yeah. I mean, amazing, absolutely amazing. He bowls leg breaks with the control of a finger spinner.
Yeah,
and he returned figures that a finger spinner would envy. And how he did it, well, practice. He was one too who lived life on the outside a bit too, didn't he? But I'm all for that. Why not?
Yes, indeed. That's a lovely way to finish off the conversation, Henry. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. This has been one of the most fun discussions, as one of my friends just said. It's just lovely listening to you again, and hope to see you soon somewhere in the future again.
Well, I shan't forget that glass of wine. When you let me know when you're coming over.
Yes, sure.
And I'll let you know if I come over to you.
Yes.
And we'll do a bit of that.
Sure. Thank you so much, Henry. Lovely.
Goodbye.